Alright, welcome to this explainer. Today, we're tracing the wild, chaotic, and frankly bizarre history of the world's most popular family of sports. You might think you know the game you watch every weekend, but its roots are far older and a whole lot messier than you could probably ever imagine.
So let me ask you, who actually invented football? I mean, England loves to claim it, and the US has a totally different game in mind when they hear the word. But the truth is, the human urge to kick, carry, and fight over a ball is something we literally all share.
The history of this game is a global story. It's packed with chaotic brawls, ancient rituals, and some completely unexpected technological inventions. So let's jump right in and see how absolute anarchy eventually turned into the billion-dollar modern codes we know today.
Section 1. The ancient global game, kicking and carrying before the rules.
Our very first stop takes us all the way back to ancient China, to a game known as Cuju. This competitive sport dates back to the Han Dynasty. We're talking the 2nd or 3rd centuries BC. It essentially involved players passing a ball to each other, kind of like modern keepy-uppies, without ever letting it touch the ground. In the really competitive versions, teams would stay on their own side of the pitch and try to kick the ball through a circular hole. And get this, Cuju is officially cited by FIFA as the earliest recognized form of football.
Now think about the incredible contrast between different cultures here. In ancient China, Cuju was strictly focused on using the feet to maneuver the ball. But halfway across the world, indigenous peoples in the Americas were playing Mesoamerican ball games. They use heavy, bouncing rubber balls, striking them with their hands, netting, or even their hips. So while both of these traditions are incredibly ancient, the Mesoamerican games were actually much closer to what we recognize today as basketball or volleyball. There was no distinct evolutionary link to foot-based games at all.
But honestly, the urge to just kick a ball, it's a completely global impulse. Ancient Greece and Rome had games called Episkyrus and Harpastum, which actually looked a lot like modern rugby. Up in Greenland, the Inuit played a game called Oxacat, right out on the ice. And down in Australia, indigenous tribes played Marngrook, where they'd kick and catch a ball made entirely out of possum skin. Clearly, humanity has just always loved a good ball game.
Section 2. Medieval mob football, town brawls, and pig bladders.
Fast forward to the Middle Ages in England, and football had become a massive headache for the authorities. In a 1363 proclamation, King Edward III officially banned handball, football, or hockey, or other such idle games. And why was the king banning a sport? Well, because these games were incredibly disruptive. They were literally pulling peasants away from their archery practice, which the military desperately needed for actual wars.
See, the crucial thing to understand here is that mob football wasn't a structured sport. It was absolute anarchy. There were no nice rectangular pitches. It was just an unlimited number of players from neighboring villages clashing en masse. The whole object was to move an inflated animal bladder, usually a pig's bladder, miles across the rough countryside to the opponent's parish church. They usually played this during religious festivals like Shrovetide, and they were basically just town-wide riots. I mean, early records even document accidental stabbings and deaths during the chaos. It was wild.
Now, it wasn't just the English peasants getting in on the action either. Take the absolutely fascinating example of 16th century Italy's Calcio Fiorentino. This was a brutal, military-style game played in Florence. Young aristocrats would literally dress up in fine silk costumes and just pummel each other. Players were perfectly allowed to punch, shoulder charge, and deliver blows below the belt. It was essentially organized, aristocratic combat.
Section 3. Taming the chaos, the English public schools. So eventually, English public schools started adopting football to keep their wealthy teenage students fit. But here's the crazy part. Every single school developed its own unique rules based entirely on their physical architecture. Schools like Rugby and Marlborough had these massive open grass fields, right? So they developed carrying codes where you could just pick up the ball and run. But schools like Charterhouse and Westminster were stuck in cities with highly restricted playing areas like hard stone cloisters. You can't exactly tackle a boy onto a stone floor, so they naturally developed kicking and dribbling codes that strictly use the feet.
Well, eventually, these students grew up, went to university, and quickly realized they couldn't even play against each other because their rules were completely incompatible. This tension finally boiled over in 1863, when representatives met at a tavern in London to form the Football Association, or the FA. At this pivotal meeting, they voted on 2 massive rules. They formally banned running with the ball in hand, and they banned hacking, which was literally the act of kicking your opponent in the shins. The clubs that wanted to keep carrying the ball and hacking opponents, they just walked out. And that moment created the permanent schism between association football, what many call soccer, and rugby.
Section 4. The rubber bladder revolution, standardizing the ball. Okay, we need to talk about the ball itself, because up until the mid-19th century, footballs were still just inflated pig bladders wrapped in leather, and this came with some major problems. First off, pigs aren't perfectly round, so the bladders had completely irregular shapes, which made the bounce totally unpredictable. Second, they popped all the time. But worst of all, and this is genuinely morbid, they had to be blown up by human mouths. This frequently led to people contracting deadly lung diseases right from the rotting animal tissue.
Thankfully, technology finally caught up. In 1851, a shoemaker from the town of Rugby named Richard Linden exhibited the very first rubber inflatable bladder. Now there is a dark, tragic twist to this story. Linden supposedly invented this rubber version after his own wife died from a lung disease she contracted by blowing up those pig bladders. A huge turning point. Shortly after that, in 1855, the famous American inventor Charles Goodyear exhibited a perfectly spherical vulcanized rubber ball. Suddenly, the ball was standardized, it was durable, and it was actually round. Modern reliable gameplay was finally possible.
Section 5. The modern football family, a tree of diverging codes. So from those original English schools, a massive family tree of sports branched out into the massive global codes we know today. Association football uses a rectangular pitch, a perfect sphere, and allows forward passing strictly with the feet. Rugby union kept the oval ball, technically a prolate spheroid, and expressly forbids passing the ball forward with your hands. Meanwhile, American football kept the rectangular pitch and the oval ball, but as we're about to see, they eventually introduced the forward pass by hand.
Over the next few decades, rapid innovations created the highly distinct games we love today. In 1866, Australian rules completely adapted to fit on massive cricket ovals. In 1880, Walter Kemp invented the line of scrimmage, which firmly broke American football away from its rugby roots. In 1895, rugby league split from rugby union for a totally different reason. Working-class players in Northern England simply needed to be paid for missing work to play. And in 1906, American football officially legalized the forward hand pass. Why did they do that? Because the old rugby-style scrums were resulting in so many player deaths and injuries that U.S. President Theodore Roosevelt literally threatened to ban the sport entirely.
And look at where we are today, 250 million. That is the number of people across the globe who actively play association football right now. It is played in over 200 nations, making it, by far, the most popular single sport on Earth.
So I have to ask you, what does the word football actually mean to you? Because as we've seen throughout this explainer, this single word still causes massive geographic arguments today.
Depending entirely on where you live, football might mean soccer, gridiron, Aussie rules, Gaelic football in Ireland, or rugby. But the incredible takeaway from this whole explainer is that no matter what code you're watching on the turf this weekend, you are participating in a beautifully fractured lineage. Whether you're watching a quarterback throw a massive touchdown or a striker bend a perfect free kick into the top corner, it literally all traces back to those chaotic, unruly village brawls and ancient human rituals.
We've gone from pig bladders and town-wide riots to vulcanized rubber and billion-dollar global industries. So I'll leave you with this final thought. As technology advances, rules adapt, and player safety continues to take priority, what will the football of the next century actually look like? Will all these codes start to merge back together, or will they diverge even further? Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep your eye on the ball.